been built up by successful community organisations. I'm going to have to ask our remaining speakers to speed up a little bit. So I'm going to ask Toby to come in now.
Thank you. As you can see, I'm not working today. Well, I am working, but I'm.
The big society is one where they're left holding the phone.
Well, I think if we're expecting communities and people to step in and kind of fill the space, then we're going to have to get more used to juggling in this kind of way. It's really good to be here, particularly at WCH, because my background is working in housing and homelessness, and I remember working, it was a great privilege, working with someone who was an ex-homeless guy who'd been involved in the squats on Elgin Avenue that kind of predate WCH. And I think we need to remember that a lot of this stuff has been going on forever. And the origins are people doing things for themselves to meet need. And I think there's a lot of lessons for us to learn from housing in particular, because what started as a self-help kind of people responding to their own need, and the rise of cooperative housing and social housing originating from that can very quickly become something which is very, very removed from communities and run very effectively as businesses, but has lost the kind of founding principles. And clearly there are RSLs and housing providers who, possibly better at the business aspects of their work than the social aspects of the work. Big Society, I guess, I've always felt since it was first published, offers some opportunities. There are huge risks attached to that, but I think we have to be honest and acknowledge that in many respects it goes beyond what Labour offered in terms of its ambition. The support for mutuals, the support for co-production and co-design are more ambitious than we had with some of the kind of empowerment provision, and indeed the localism, the community rights, I think, offer some genuine kind of statutory basis for some of the ambition that Labour talked about. So I think, the rhetoric and the opportunity potentially is very, very strong. We're talking about placing power in the hands of people who lack it, which I think is an improvement on the idea of empowerment, which seemed to kind of be more about a finite commodity that people could simply pass, that the powerful could hand out power to those. So I think it's recognising a degree of kind of, it's not limited, it's actually about giving people a chance to be more powerful. I think community organisers, which Jess is going to talk about, it's a good example of that, of kind of challenging power dynamics and vested interests. And I've written about the idea of creative disruption as a way of shaking up and challenging traditional power bases and vested interests wherever they reside. And they don't reside solely in government or in the private sector, they also reside in the voluntary and community sector. But the biggest challenge, I think, for Big Society, for us in responding to Big Society, is that creating opportunities does not necessarily lead to improved outcomes, particularly for society as a whole, but for those who lack power, to go back to that kind of ambition that the government talk about. In actual fact, we should anticipate that the more powerful, the better organised, the more affluent, the more ambitious amongst society, the more ambitious communities are better equipped to take advantage of those opportunities. So there's a huge risk that actually creating opportunities and sitting back and saying, come on guys, make the best of them, will actually exacerbate inequalities within society, which, if you believe the conclusions at the spirit level, is bad for society, and if you're concerned with social justice, then is just kind of undesirable in itself. So I think that increasingly and somewhat depressingly, the signs are not good. The rhetoric seems not to be matched by some of the actions. Great to hear Win Stanley getting a quote before. I mean, the importance of land should not be underestimated in power, I think. But, we're seeing increasing signs of a dissonance between the rhetoric and the action. And an example close to my heart is the recent decision of the Office of Civil Society around their Strategic Partners Programme. Now, I have a vested interest in this. Urban Forum wasn't successful in our application, but I don't care whether Urban Forum... Sorry, I can't say that. I don't think the point is whether urban forum is funded or not. It's more a question of who else is going to provide the voice into government for smaller groups, for smaller community organisations throughout the country, and who is going to speak up for the equalities groups who lack power. We know these groups lack power, so given that the scheme was talking about smaller organisations having representation into government and the importance of marginalised groups having voice, the decisions are quite sort of unexplainable, because there's not one single organisation who works exclusively or has a particular focus on an inequalities group or a smaller community organisation. There are some very good organisations who've been awarded strategic partner status, don't get me wrong, and locality is an obvious one, but there are many, many gaps, and they chose not to support those organisations. So I think that's a good example of a dissonance between the rhetoric. So I think, you know, we need to see government directing resources to target support. It is limited, resources are limited, but the support and the resources we have need to be targeted to those who lack power if we're going to achieve the kind of ambition that the government says it wants to, because otherwise we will exacerbate inequality. And increasingly I'm of the view that we are going to have to fight to take advantage of these opportunities. They are not going to be simply afforded to us, because others with more resources, more power, will be better equipped. So I think it's critical that we prepare right now for the use of new community rights, and we kind of make sure that we... What's he got? A hair. Thank you very much, Kathy. He's probably got worse than that on his fingers already, to be honest. Dad's in charge today. You know, I think we're going to have to fight to take advantage of these opportunities, and it's critical that we organise now, in advance of the new legislation, to prepare ourselves to ensure that we don't actually see kind of rising inequality. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks very much, Toby. So that's the fourth test of big society. Does power move to those who have power already, or does it move to those who do not have power? And I think we can see what's happening at the moment, and there's a real challenge for government there. I'm going to ask Paul to